Welcome to the SmartTechCheck Podcast, hosted by Mark Vina, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Vina, host of the SmartTechCheck Podcast. Today is Friday, September 9th, 2022. Joining me for today's podcast are Stewart Wolpin, who scribes for Popular Mechanics, U.S. News, Techlicious, Investopedia, and other fine publications. He's got some fun stories to tell about his Apple iPhone ordering experience in a few minutes. John Quain, who writes for the New York Times, Smart Cities and Tom's Guide, and Rob Pegoraro, who writes frequently on tech policy for Wirecutter, PC Magazine, and USA Today. Gentlemen, how are you? We're in a post-IFA, post-Apple event mode today, but how are each of you today before we begin the podcast?
God save the king.
Good. Yes.
That's
you have to say something about that. I mean, she was a wonderful person. She said she really was a model for other world leaders, and she'll be missed. You know, interesting stuff. John, how are you?
Same here. I'm sorry, the Queen. I would watch the Queen's message in Canada every Christmas and look forward to it. And but on the other hand, off to a good start in the football pool. So that's
Rob, you're heading out to the UK to attend her funeral in a few days. I
am in fact heading across the Atlantic, but not to the UK, to Denmark. Speaking at a conference called, weirdly enough, Tech Barbecue in Copenhagen next week. Judging a bunch of pitching startups.
Well, it's always nice to be back and traveling. Rob and John and I were at IFA last week. We're just going to talk about for a few minutes. Stuart, you weren't there.
Badge on that collection.
No, my back was aching in sympathy.
Well, I can assure you, if you saw the hotel rooms that we were afforded.
I'm sorry, how much did you pay for it?
Yeah, don't complain if it's free. I got it, John. Stuart, I got that. But they were comically small. I mean, there's a photo floating around on the internet somewhere with Stuart. Not Stuart, not with you, with John, and the rest of the IFA press cotillion that we normally travel with, and it was pretty funny. It was pretty funny, you know. But I blame you, Rob. That was your recommendation.
I didn't put him up to it. I actually fit reasonably well in my room. It helps that I'm short, and I guess I was on the 5th floor. Some of you are on the 6th floor.
Yeah,
but having seen the pictures of where we'll be bunking down in Copenhagen, I think that will be a space efficient, space optimized room of its own.
No, that was, and by the way, the Stuart, the thing that you did not have to enjoy was because I did a lot of video work, and among a lot of other people who were there, the upload internet speeds in this hotel were, shall we say, slow. I mean, it took me hours to upload. You know, a 15-minute video is unbelievable, but probably will not stay there again if I have a choice in the future. You know, even if the room is
neighborhood though. We were in a good part of Berlin.
No, I did like the neighborhood. I liked the convenience of the trains, and you know, hey, listen, Stuart's absolutely right. If it's free, you can't complain, right? So you can try to complain, but let us get into our first topic, and that is IFA. Now, Stuart, I'm sure you were reading some of the stuff that was coming online. You didn't read any of this that was coming online. Yes, you did. And let me just start with John and get his general impressions. I mean, my general impressions before we do that is that 166,000 people apparently showed up. Kind of nice to see everybody back in, outdoor, getting into the swing of things. And so I think that the show was a success from that standpoint, because that was a nice number for that show. And by the way, let me say also as well, the weather was fantastic. I mean, unlike the last couple of IFAs where it's very humid in Berlin in late August, it was actually it was San Jose weather, frankly.
Yeah.
70 degrees.
Isn't it 100 degrees in San Jose right now?
I was just going to say, you mean old San Jose weather.
Well, yeah, and by the way, my power went out for 8 hours the other day. I will not even talk about that. The day that I got back from IFA. But John, let me get your general impressions of what the trade show and what you thought.
I thought IFA did very well. I mean, I think they really got it back on its feet pretty quickly. I was kind of surprised at how well the whole show went off. The weather certainly helps because they're, Qualcomm, well, I should say Snapdragon, because they're trying to brand the Snapdragon, had an outdoor thing. Everything was perfect for all those kinds of events and positions. White goods, that's, consumer electronics appliances were back. Full force, Melee, all those companies were there on display, had all their latest kitchen countertops things, which I like because I like to cook and coffee. IFA is all about coffee. Everywhere you go, coffee.
Good coffee.
All that was great. And
very good coffee.
Very good coffee. And, LG obviously had some big stuff for us on the display front, a 97-inch OLED set and the curve. The gaming monitor that would curve and then go flat again, and some other ideas about aligning with your eyesight, a motorized monitor for that. So some interesting ideas there. Nothing groundbreaking, but just important that all these companies were back and on display and in full force. I was pretty impressed actually at how well it went.
Yeah. Yep. Even Samsung, of course, because they have kind of cornered the market on curved glass. They had some really interesting curved monitor concepts. They had one concept in their booth, which it was in portrait mode. I want to say it was 43, maybe it was 49 inches, and it was really positioned for gaming. But I could easily see using that type of monitor in a productivity orientation. And of course, let's not leave out Lenovo. They have that ThinkPad X1 Fold, which I think from a usage model standpoint introduces some very interesting concepts. Rob, what were your thoughts? Anything that grabbed you in particular?
So similar, yeah. It didn't really hit me until I guess the first full day of walking around the show floor. This was the first time I'd gone to any sort of gadget electronics show and actually seen a full spectrum of, what people think we want to buy since CES 2020. Because CES in January, LG decided to pull out, so they had this sad little wireframe exhibit where you could scan QR codes, combining the worst parts of a virtual trade show and an in-person one. Samsung, Panasonic had very minimal floor presences. So this one, I really felt like it was getting a look at the entirety of the industry. And like most of it, Sony wasn't there. They did have IFA for the uninitiated. It takes place in the Berlin Messe Fairgrounds, but there's like 30 different halls, some stacked on top of each other. And 4 of those were closed. So it was at least a little simpler, shorter to walk through. Interesting. Other trends I'd call out, there was a lot of emphasis on energy efficiency since Europe has realized that cheap Russian gas actually has a price of its own that is really obnoxious to pay these days. Lots of interesting stuff in the smart home space. Samsung noted in their keynote, which some of you listening may regard this as more of a threat than a promise. But by the end of 2023, 100% of their major appliances will be Wi-Fi connected.
Yeah, I like that. I thought that's a good forward-looking plan, definitely. Even my coffee maker is Wi-Fi connected. So
as long as you can actually operate the dang thing without putting it on Wi-Fi, my back surface is big enough already.
No, I have a smart current coffee machine, which I never thought the connectivity piece would be that important, but it's really actually pretty interesting because you can customize the robust flavor of the coffee. It obviously knows what type of coffee is in there from a barcode standpoint. So there are some advantages to having a smart coffee machine. Stewart, from a virtual standpoint, this is you were watching and from afar while we were trapped in very tiny hotel rooms. What did you think? Anything jumped at you?
I'll tell you. The reason that I didn't go, not only for a health concern, not COVID, but my back. But I work for sort of a rival publication. IFA and CES have chosen sides, and unfortunately, I'm on the CES side of things. But overall, seeing and hearing how successful the show was does bode well for CES 2023. I think if the international community was very happy to go to Berlin, I think going to Las Vegas is not that big of a leap. And having spoken to the CTA people over the last couple of weeks, they are expecting not 176,000 people, which is what they got in 2020, but they're creeping up to 150,000, which is an impressive number considering what we're coming out of. Now, of course, it's helped that Nevada has, we say, looser restrictions than, say, New York or California. But I think a successful IFA with almost full participation and almost full attendance, I think bodes well for CES 2023.
No, I think that's a great point, Stewart, because from a leading indicator standpoint, had the attendance been really low, like under 100,000 people, I'm sure the CES folks would be really a bit nervous, frankly, about, hey, we're going to get a big crowd. But I think you're right. What was interesting, and I think probably you were next to me during that keynote. I know you were in love with that Huawei keynote.
Yes.
And the only reason why I bring it up, it's like 2 years in a row now. And I know you did a piece on this recently, but
Yep.
I just don't get these guys. It's almost like, well, I do get these guys because they are operating in a reality distortion field, which I think is one of the comments you made in your piece. But are they that oblivious? I mean, because
this was a really weird keynote to see. The CEO of Huawei's Western European consumer business came out. It was not like a keynote. He was interviewed on stage by an analyst, so there was a little bit of pushback. But this guy, Lin Tian, he was just all sunshine and rainbows, even though by every objective number, Huawei's phone business especially is in horrible shape. It is really cratered because they don't have access to, they can use the Android open source platform, but all the services that make Android, like the Play Store, the Gmail app, Google Maps, they don't have. And he was saying, no, we're great. We're, we have our own alternative app store. I took a look at it on the show floor. The Huawei App Gallery is a really good way to get your phone hacked. Because if you do a search for an app that isn't in it, of which a great many are not, like there's some social network called Facebook. I hear it's pretty popular. Instagram, Twitter. It will point you to some third-party site that has hosted a copy of the APK file, the actual file you download to an Android phone, which you can then sideload, which, you show that to any security professional, they will either scream or vomit or maybe both, because that's the last thing you should do. Right. This guy was saying, no, it's good. If we don't have the app, we can get it for you elsewhere. Absolutely not. And, suggesting that privacy is a top priority, which, remember, all this started because under the prior administration, but not just the prior administration, a lot of people were saying, like, look, this is a company that, if you're a tech company in China, the government doesn't have to ask for your data. They can basically just take it. So you should really be mindful of that. It's a good reason, like, WeChat, I know it's necessary to do business in China, but I don't have it on my phone. And I hope none of you do either.
Well,
denial, and just the fact that their business has gone so badly, like the actual founder of Huawei sent out a company-wide memo, like saying, look, for the next few years, our priority has to be survival.
Right. But Rob, you would not know that from some of the slides that were presented, because there was one slide in there. Well, the one slide that really bothered me, because it's the personification of misinformation, was they showed, instead of showing, they can't show revenue growth year over year, they had a metric in there, brand amplification or brand value.
Yes, $71 billion.
Right.
My personal brand value, by the way, is at least $5 and change.
In an American context, I can't imagine you going to your manager saying, my personal sales went down 70% last year, but my awareness with my customers went up 80%. I mean, I just don't get. I mean, to me, I just laugh.
Yeah.
And that's only because you made the FBI's most wanted list.
Could be. John, anything else jumped out about you about let me just throw one thing in here before John, get you to comment. What was interesting, and I made this observation a few times to some of the entities that I met with, is that at CES earlier in the year, the Matter Smart Home Connect, interoperability initiative was everywhere. You couldn't go to a booth, you couldn't go to a device where you didn't see that Matter logo. Of course, there's no Matter devices have shown up yet. That hopefully will happen very quickly. But the CSA has done a really nice job. Who oversees the Matter interoperability standard has done a nice job of promoting it. There was very little discussion about Matter at IFA, which kind of surprised me from an awareness standpoint. And in fact, there was a fascinating demo that I got with this Home Connectivity Alliance, which is a similar type of standard that doesn't compete with Matter, but it's focused on interoperability and with appliances, which I thought was really interesting. But I thought it was fascinating that there really wasn't a lot of awareness with Matter, which really kind of surprised me, because the smart home folks are really depending on that to come together to really expand the smart home footprint.
Did it get a shout out in the slide at Samsung's presser, or did it not even get that?
They did, but it wasn't the most prominent, piece. It was probably 40 minutes into the presentation, if I recall.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise that the Home Connectivity Alliance is big at IFA, because that's a Bosch initiative, and it was introduced in IFA about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, and they're supporting a lot of major brands, Stewart. I mean, they got a lot of guys.
Yeah. Bosch has a lot of pull, and they got a lot of people involved by keeping sort of in the background. But they recognized the need for that early on, and everybody else did as well.
John, any last closing comments before we flip to our next fun topic?
I think the most interesting thing to me was, about that connectivity, you don't need that stuff when you've got Alexa and Google Assistant. I mean, it makes it a much harder argument these days to get that standard. But what I thought just in general, micro LED has not moved very much in the last couple of years as a technology, and we expected it to come along. And also there was a lot more movement in home appliances, where after, years of pandemic and people are using their appliances a lot more, there was much more technology, I would say, built into appliances in the last 2 years than there had been in the past 5 or 6. So there's a renewed focus on that. And appliances like the one I'm going to be writing about, which is like a microwave, air fryer, steam fryer, oven, convection oven, all in one device. Things like that will change. So I think there was a lot of movement in appliances. Unfortunately, that's something you won't really see at CES, but I think Stewart's right too. So far, fingers crossed, IFA's success bodes well for CES.
What was that skit on SNL years ago with Dan Aykroyd, the Wedge-O-Matic, or someone?
Bass-O-Matic. That's great. Bass, yeah.
All right, let's head to our next topic here, and that is, Apple had their big day on Wednesday. They announced new iPhones, new AirPods, new Apple Watches. That's, of course, we'll talk a little bit about that. But I got to start the podcast because I don't want him to run out of energy. Stewart, you faithfully tried to get on and log on. Buy an iPhone.
You're doing this for work, right? Please tell me you're doing this for work.
I'm doing it for work.
Well, and Stuart, before you jump in, I tried to do it. I woke up at 5 a.m. Pacific time because I wanted to see if I can get one next Friday when they become released, which I typically do. And it took me about 8 minutes to get in. And finally, when I refreshed my screen, and I had already kind of prepped, they have a process where you can kind of prep your trade in and get all the stuff done, and you're simply just clicking to confirm payment. And it took me 8 minutes to get in, and I got a ship date of already September 28th, which was shocking. 9 or 10 minutes into their ability to take orders. Maybe it's not so shocking, but it seems to happen every time. And I suspect what will happen, since it seems like the Apple Store and their online process was overloaded, my guess is some of those orders will be pulled in, after they kind of sort out all the data. But Stuart, tell us about your adventure today.
Well, I also got up at your time, 5 a.m., my time, 8 a.m. But the funny thing was, usually when they say the pre-sale starts on X day, it's usually midnight Pacific time. So I'm used to being on the phone with either Apple or T-Mobile at 3 a.m. New York time. And so I'm usually up at that hour anyway. And I go on it, no, it's going to be 8 a.m. So now I got to go to bed and then set the alarm to get up at 8. I'm on the phone with them for about 45 minutes, and she kept apologizing for that they're being overloaded. I'm talking about T-Mobile now. And they said they called me back, and they called me back about 3 hours later, and then that's what made me late to our little confab here today. And it's like, I go through this every time I get a new iPhone. It used to be every year, now it's every other year, just to keep up for work. But it never ceases to amaze me that the carriers in Apple are never prepared for the for the volume. And this knocks me out. The iPhone has been around for 15 years. How have they not figured out that there's going to be a huge volume of orders when it goes on pre-sale? It never ceases to amaze me. Well, we're a little surprised at the volume. How?
It's part of the experience.
It's
part of the experience. That's a whole
part of it.
Like,
well,
around the other way.
Guys, the conspiratorial part of me says, do they do that in part by design because they want to create this perception of incredible demand? Now, I could be wrong about that, but
it's like camping out for Rolling Stones tickets.
Is disgruntled customers. But speaking from a totally objective point of view, the fact that it was even worse than usual this time perhaps bodes well, given the economy and everything else, that the sales will reach. I mean, Apple was the only company that I know of that had a relatively seamless production process where everybody was having all sorts of supply chain problems. And the predictions that I had been monitoring for the last couple of months was that Apple was expecting to at least equal the sales of the iPhone 13. I know that, for instance, Samsung had downgraded their expectations to about 30 million total units for the year for all of their phones. And Apple is saying, we think we're pretty much on target. And that's analysts seem to agree. So maybe given the surprise volume and the date slip so soon date slippages on shipping, that maybe they're right. That Apple will be the outlier in the smartphone business this year. I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Well, my guess is, I think I saw a story this morning that the dates on the baseline iPhone 14, you can still get them fairly quickly, within a couple of weeks. It's the Pro models and the Max models, which is where the
Pro models are just so much better. When I was watching the presentation, I'm going, why would anybody want a non-Pro model? The only reason to get them is for the OLED. If you always got the entry level phones, the non-pros, the entry level 14s now have that OLED screen, which is a huge step up if you're in the sunnier climes. My wife has the 12, just the plain 12, and it's impossible to see the screen during the daytime. So that may be the reason to step up for that. But otherwise, the Pro just has such a 4 times better camera, and it has that SOS satellite thing, and
yeah, so I want Rob to comment on the satellite. I call it the Tom Hanks feature. You'll never get stranded on an island for it. But and by the way, that capability is available on the 14 as well. That might be a good reason to get, even if you don't, need the camera capability.
I thought it was only on the Pro models.
Nope.
The satellite's available on both ends.
It's on the 14.
Yeah.
It's on the 14. Okay. Yeah, it's a baseline feature now. And. So, Rob, what was your thought? Tom Hanks?
So, first of all, I got to call out how much of the Apple presentation was basically, if you don't buy our stuff, you're going to die. It was a lot of for a while, I'm like, am I watching local TV news? Because this is all about the horrible things that can happen to me and how, when your car gets smashed into bits and you have the airbag in front of your face, at least your iPhone will call for help. And then you have this whole thing where, let's be realistic. Being in some wilderness area with no means of contact is the very most corner of corner cases. So I'm glad they're doing this. For certain people, it's going to be really handy. For other people, it's not, it's interesting in a technological sense. Like, I want to know what satellites they're using, how it works, how good the coverage is. Fascinating. And there are other companies trying to do this. Obviously, T-Mobile and SpaceX have that announcement where they plan to make it available on any old phone, but SpaceX has to launch a bunch of new satellites. There's a company called Lynk, L-Y-N-K, to save you all a lot of searching. It's based a short distance from me in Falls Church, where they're also aiming to use satellites as a cell tower in the sky. There's lots of people working on it, but of course, Apple, being Apple, has gotten a whole lot of attention. One thing that was not spelled out in the event or in the press release or in the fine print at the bottom of the press release, they're saying you're going to have 2 free years of this. They're not saying what it will cost after that. And I think, not to be ghoulish, but inevitably we're going to find a story of someone whose dried out corpse will be found clutching an iPhone that had been in service for 2 years and 5 days, and they forgot to renew the service. So I think they're going to have to make it free because I can't imagine it costs that much to operate. Otherwise, there's potential for real PR
Bad
blowback.
publicity resulting from the 2 years and 5 days, not worth the price of admission.
Well, I agree with that observation, Rob, because the moment that, first of all, the first person that this feature saves, Apple will be running commercials all day long. Look what
That's
this
the
person
they let
did.
off. All these people testifying their Apple, dear Tim Cook, your device saved my life. I will buy your products forever and ever.
You don't want a story that says of the relatives of the guy who died in the desert because he didn't have his credit card loaded. Damn
it, come on. He was trying to text the credit card via the satellite, and then the service expired.
But John, let me turn over the camera functionality. I mean, I was very impressed though with some of the camera stuff. You've got 48 megapixels now, and by the way, there's also, I think that thematically, I think Apple now is recognizing the front camera and the back camera are almost of equal weight. You know, the selfie camera, the camera on the screen, typically has gotten, not as much capability and functionality because, it's for selfies. But now they seem to be thinking that from a robustness standpoint, that the camera really has to be of equal capability, which I thought was interesting. There's also a video stabilizer feature, which I thought was nice. If you're chasing Rob down the road, and next, you need a gimbal to do that.
Through the halls of CES.
Yes, like a reality IFA podcast. But were you impressed with the camera
Worst
stuff?
reality show ever.
I mean, it definitely, it's a presentation, so it's hard to tell unless we test it and stuff. The low light capabilities of the camera looked improved, definitely improved. Definitely a weakness of the cameras before. And you're right about that front facing camera. Just the influencer market alone and the selfie market. I mean, since so many images are taken with that front facing camera where, it should be a better camera. So that's definitely a help. In other ways, it's kind of a catch up though, in terms of what other phones offer. So it's hard to see a major improvement. Always difficult to eliminate vibration or, shaky motion without it being optical or digital, and how they do it and how much resolution is lost. And they're saying, well, we'll just take the center pixels is how we're doing it. That remains to be seen. Maybe people ditched me at the Withings party in Berlin, so I was chasing after people down the street. That might help. But other than that, I don't know how well these phones are going to do. There's no major, I think people have noticed there wasn't a major hullabaloo about this Apple event. There wasn't a lot of coverage of it. Not a lot going on with the phone. And I, as I keep saying here on this program, the phone is kind of over, and we're kind of searching around for a new function to bring people on. But pretty much everybody has one, and nothing really major is happening with smartphones. And it's hard to see any new technology coming along that will make a major change. The satellite phone is helpful. Hello, Iridium, but from way back when.
We're all showing already.
I wish it would come on all the time, because a lot of parts of the country we don't have cell towers, and everybody forgets that. So you're driving along and nothing. So that would help to use it on a more regular basis. But to Ross' point, it's wicked expensive, and which is why cell phones didn't work before. They were so expensive. But what did you guys think of the watch? I want
to bring that up. I want to give Stewart a chance to opine on that, because I think, again, there was all kinds of rumors that they were going to do some crazy stuff with the watches. They did come out with what I think is an extreme sports watch, the Ultra version. If you're to me, it's a corner case type of watch, because you can use it's much larger because it can act as a dive computer. I've never went scuba diving in my life, so I'm not a customer for that watch. But that's kind of niche-y. It's almost like they're bifurcating the watch category, because they know they can. Those people who engage in those type of sports presumably can spend more money. So that, to me, that was a bit of a margin and revenue play for that. They did add a temperature sensor to the baseline Series 8. So there's things like ovulation tracking, which doesn't appeal to us. Well, I guess you would maybe if you are married and you want to avoid surprises or encourage family planning. So that was, I think, an interesting feature. But, to me, and so I want you to jump in a second, Apple seems to be steering away from the. If you look at the initial launch of the Apple Watch, it was Jonathan Ive's special. It was all about beauty and grace, and this is going to be a classic, elegant piece on your wrist. And now, not that Apple's not concerned about that anymore, but it really is a wearable device for managing your digital health and exercise. They've kind of moved pretty dramatically in that direction. So, Stewart, what did you think?
Well, I thought what you had just talked about, the fertility ovulation feature, now gave every woman of childbearing age a reason to buy an Apple Watch. Now, whether I don't know what the demographic split was previous to this on the watch between male and female, but given all the news around women's reproductive health, I think it's a very clever thing for Apple to a niche market for Apple to. I shouldn't say niche market. That's stupid. A market to latch on, and I don't know that anybody else has, given the publicity around the topic these days. But overall, that's not surprising either, because the Watch Ultra and a lot of the features on the new iPhone are all very targeted, shall we say, demographic targeted, as opposed to what Apple had been doing before this, which is more mass market, general market kinds of approaches. So the fact that they are targeting specific demographics with their products indicates that they've run out of mainstream stuff, as John noted, that there isn't a whole lot more that you can add for a general audience, that they have to start targeting specific demographics to lure more and new customers in.
John?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Although there are two concerns I had about it. One was, I know a lot of people talked about the Ultra watches being this kind of, for, I think my colleagues at the New York Times had said it was for, ultra marathoners. Like, no, it's not. It's for me. It's for guys. I would use it. Now has features that the Apple Watch didn't have before, which is why I wouldn't have it. Now it seems more like the guy's watch that uses that stuff. It's tougher. It's more indestructible. Things like that they should have done a long time ago when trying to come after the Garmin market, which is why I wear like a Suunto or a Garmin, and I never wear an iWatch. That's just not a thing for me. But the ovulation thing, the privacy issues and the legal issues that raises scare the living daylights out of me.
Well, they addressed that, John.
Yeah, I addressed the end-to-end encryption very heavily, knowing that many of their customers live in states that are more, shall we say, theocratically ruled.
Yeah.
Handmaid's Tale. Because if you may want to know these factors, you may very much not want your state government to know.
Right. But I know I'm always skeptical about anything like that. And given the legal, what do they call it? Legal exposure or whatever.
Well, that's
not a
there's
feature
nothing for Apple to hand over. There's obvious. I mean, if you want to concoct nightmare scenarios, there are lots of ways a state might decide to surveil its citizens that don't rely on getting data off a device on your wrist.
Right.
You went to the Stasi Museum in Berlin, right? I mean,
right. And that should make you think, we say it's encrypted if we say this, but given the legal peril, that's the word I was looking for.
But John, in all fairness, I mean, Apple kind of crossed that Rubicon when they decided to get into the digital health space. I mean, we're talking about, of course, something that's very personal to women and to families, but you could extend that argument to everything that Apple does. From a health standpoint. So I agree with you, that but I think they're going into this with their eyes open. They realize that, that
realistically, the bigger private vulnerability is someone who has their health data encrypted on their Apple Watch, sees that they're pregnant, then texts somebody to say that, forgetting that somebody is on Android and it's unencrypted because Apple thinks that if you really want encrypted messaging, you should use WhatsApp or just buy. That was what Tim Cook said at that conference. Somebody was the code conference. Somebody was complaining, like, when I text my mom, all these things don't work. And he said, buy your mom an iPhone, which is kind of a jackass thing to say. Maybe mom has decided for her own reasons she likes Android.
But
we've got a minute left here, and that was not discussed at the Apple event. That came up during that Recode conference a couple of days ago, and I actually did some tweeting on that topic because I was shocked. That was to me one of the more and Tim Cook is not an arrogant guy, but that seemed to be a very arrogant response because about this that there's legitimate reasons why RCS would be a nice thing for Apple to get behind,
Yeah. But the other thing that people like that forget, stupidly, there's this thing called screen capture, and there's a bounty on this stuff. So, you can encrypt it all you want, but if somebody screen captures something and decides to send that in for the $20,000 reward, you're cooked. No pun intended.
Yeah.
We're going to have to wrap this up because we're almost out of time here, but I'm glad to be back here. And the guys, again, thank you for all your time. Let me pull up my little closing comment slide. Guys, thanks for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, thanks for making the Smart Tech Check podcast part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Mark Vina Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great week. And Stewart, I hope you sort out your iPhone 14 order wars.
Good luck.
It's for work.